Hello, my name is Holly, and this is the Murder She Shed. But just like the last video, I am still in Canada. As you guys know, I try to dig up crimes that aren't often covered. This crime case comes out of Ohio, and it is about a truly evil family that tortures and murders a 24-year-old sweet young lady with the mental capacity of an 8-year-old. First, before we begin, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button for more unique crime. Okay, I must give a warning. This story consists of SA, child abuse, incest, torture, and graphic images. It is not for the faint of heart. So this is your final warning before we begin. This is the true crime story about the murder of Vera Jo Reigel. Vera's life did not start out simple. At the age of 11, she was RAP'd by her own father. Willard Reigel was sentenced to 20 years in prison for that offense. Then her mother found a new man who would also SA Vera. Although Vera had the mental capacity of an 8-year-old, she was able to graduate high school. Soon after graduating, Vera went on disability and started receiving checks from the government. She also moved out of her mother's abusive home and moved into 13-year-old Zachary Brooks' house with him and his family. Vera, at 19 years old, had met 13-year-old Zach and fell in love. This would be a deadly mistake. CHERI Brooks is Zach's mother and the head of the household. Remember that name. Before we continue the story of Vera, we need to get to know CHERI Brooks in order to completely understand this story. CHERI was repeatedly RAP'd by her father as a little girl. CHERI's dad called her Sugar Babe. Yes, disturbing. And she uses that name to this day. CHERI lied to her mother when she was 16 and told her that, quote, the welfare people had taken her baby away. But the baby girl was not actually CHERI's. She was from a foster home. But she wasn't CHERI's baby girl. But CHERI wanted a baby girl really badly. And when you find out why she wanted the baby girl, it's disgusting. CHERI's first child was conceived with her cousin Danny Bixler Sr. And they would call each other kissing cousins. CHERI went on to have a total of 9 children with a very timid man named Kevin Brooks Sr. The first 5 children were taken away from CHERI due to SA. Yes, her own children. CHERI's only 2 girls of the 9 children were taken away, and those are the ones that upset her the most. I guess because she preferred to sexually abuse the girls. Marie was 1 year old when she was taken away from CHERI. When a relative was changing baby Marie's diaper, she noticed the baby's diaper had blood in it from being RAP'd by CHERI. CHERI's oldest son, that was just a baby, was taken away when someone walked in and seen her lifting him up in the air and performing, let's just say, acts on him. Even as CHERI was married to her husband, Kevin Brooks Sr., she would still visit her father in order to have relations with him. A few of the children who were taken did make their way back to CHERI when they were just a bit older. For some reason, even though the first 5 were removed from the home, the next 4 children were left in their mother's custody. And that's Kevin, a.k.a. Punky, Zachary, Garth, and Chucky. They were all left. CHERI became determined to have a little girl again, so she often encouraged her sons to get a young lady pregnant so she could have the little girl to abuse. This is why Vera became an easy target, because of her mental challenges. Vera's mother said that she knew CHERI when Vera was a little girl. She was neighbors with CHERI. That would be Vera's mother. And CHERI had basically asked her if she could have Vera when Vera was just a baby. So as Vera became old enough, she told her 13-year-old son, he had to get Vera pregnant. She had encouraged all of her children to have babies because she wanted to continue that chain of abuse. All of her sons claimed to be a Crip gang member. Her son Punky had been well known as the area's leader of the Crips. Punky had been very much feared in Findlay, Ohio, until August 5th of 2010 when the 19-year-old lost his battle in a tragic accident. He and his girlfriend Heather had been walking down the road on their way to just score some drugs when a vehicle slammed into Punky. Investigators determined that this was an accidental death. CHERI never could accept this, and she needed vengeance. She told everyone that Punky's girlfriend, Heather, had been responsible for his murder. According to CHERI, Punky had been pushed in front of that vehicle by his girlfriend. This had been a lie, of course, but CHERI made sure that the girlfriend paid the price. She asked one of Punky's buddies to beat Heather. So, several days after Punky's death, there was a memorial of sorts at CHERI's house. There were a lot of people present, including Punky's girlfriend. So, she leaned over and told the girl that she wanted to beat Heather. She told her it was time, and Heather was beaten and broke her nose. CHERI watched the whole time, laughing and yelling. That is what you get for killing my son, even though it's a complete lie. After Punky's death, Zachary took his brother's place as the town gang leader. Punky and his girlfriend had been dating for several years and had an infant son together. The main issue she had with Heather is she had a son instead of a daughter. CHERI chose to have Punky cremated and then refused to bury the ashes. In fact, she set the bag of ashes on a shelf in the living room next to her TV. She told anyone who came into the house, "My son is laying on the shelf up there." Next to the ashes, CHERI created a kind of shrine with a t-shirt of Punky's, some of his Crip paraphernalia, and a special area on the table below the shelf or shrine where she would leave candy bars for Punky. No one was allowed to touch those candy bars. They were only for Punky. CHERI's aunt later said that it was at this point after Punky's death when CHERI became meaner and, in her own words, crazier. This is where Vera comes into the story. Vera became pregnant with a girl at the age of 22. While Zachary was only 16 at the time, CHERI informed the couple if they had a girl that she would keep her as her own. CHERI did not want to wait any longer for Vera to have her baby, so she decided to make Vera drink 3 bottles of castor oil in order for the baby to be born on her birthday. But Vera did not have the baby till the day after CHERI's birthday. Unfortunately for the baby, it was a little girl. CHERI did not let Vera touch her baby, and as the baby got older, she would have the little girl call her mama instead of Vera. This is when the family started the torture and sadistic behavior towards Vera. Zach started seeing other girls because he had only been with Vera in order to produce a daughter for his mother. CHERI had already been taking all of Vera's disability checks from her. At any given time, there was at least 10 people living at CHERI's house, and drugs and alcohol use was rampant in that house. Vera was forced to stay in her bedroom or at times in a closet where they kept a pig. Yes, a pig. They had 2x4s nailed to the wall in order to use as a pen for the pig. And at times, Vera was forced to stay in that closet with the pig, and it was full of pig feces. The whole house was filthy. They let the pig and dogs potty everywhere in the floor. CHERI would even use the bathroom in a bucket because I suppose she was just too lazy to go to the bathroom, so she sat in a recliner and used that bucket that was in reach of that baby. Vera's daughter slept with CHERI. I can't even imagine what that poor baby went through before she was even 2 years of age. When Vera was allowed out of her room, she was forced to clean, cook, and do anything they asked. They used her as a slave and would brutally beat her at times. Witnesses recount that she was even forced to eat the pig's feces as punishment. On another occasion, Vera was beaten because she ate a Kit Kat bar which had belonged to the already deceased Punky, his shrine. By eating the chocolate, Vera had intentionally disrespected the dead man. On one occasion, Vera's daughter fell and had a goose bump on her forehead. Vera was blamed and Zach punched her in the face repeatedly. She not only was physically abused, but sexually abused by all of Zach's brothers. But they would say it was because she was easy. The nice term, not exactly what they said, but what I say for YouTube. What I'm fixing to say is disgusting and graphic, so for the next 5 seconds, fast forward if you would like. On one occasion, Vera was SA'd with her toothbrush during her monthly and then made to brush her teeth with it. Yes, I know, highly disgusting. Police had been called to the house around 10 times because of the abuse they would inflict on Vera. Each time, they would say she fell or it was some accident, and they always threatened Vera if she told what had actually happened. 2 months before her murder, police showed up at the house and found Vera covered in bruises and with a broken nose. On one incident, CHERI dropped a heavy brick on her foot, permanently damaging that foot, but she told her family that Vera had dropped it on her foot. Vera was beaten so brutally that she was actually hospitalized from the beatings, but she refused to press charges against the Brooks family. They even claimed that Vera had squirted a whole can of mace in their house and made CHERI's daughter, Shannon, have a miscarriage. Shannon was not even pregnant. It was just another lie to beat on Vera since CHERI seemed to get off on the beatings. CHERI told people that she thought that Vera looked cute with her black eyes, like a little squirrel or a raccoon. The Brooks boys had a 21-year-old cousin named Danny Bixler, who had recently gotten out of prison and started dating 17-year-old Nicole Peters. Danny is the son of CHERI's cousin that she called her kissing cousin. In nearby Tiffin, Ohio, Danny and Nicole were caught assaulting a teenager at a public park. They both ran away to hide out at the Brooks house in order to avoid prosecution for that assault. Danny and Nicole were the ones who ultimately carried out the horrific task of murdering Vera, but the motives were not their own. Vera's murder was entirely conspired and plotted, mostly by CHERI Brooks, some by her sons. CHERI convinced the couple and her children that Vera had been the one to have murdered Punky. Remember her son that had been hit by a car? She claimed Vera, not Heather now, but Vera had pushed Punky in front of that vehicle. Nicole was curious about what it would feel like to take a life anyway, and she had wanted a teardrop tattoo to match her boyfriend's. So it didn't take much convincing to get the couple to actually murder Vera. 4 days before Vera was murdered, the worst of the torture began. She was beaten intermittently throughout those days. One of CHERI's sons, Chucky, tied a padlock to the end of a belt, and the family took turns just beating Vera with this homemade weapon. A paddle was also used in Vera's head was stomped. Witnesses, including CHERI, have stated that this sort of thing had turned Nicole on SE actually. Her and her boyfriend would take breaks from the beatings, go lock themselves in a bedroom for a while. Then they would come back out and beat on Vera. The beatings occurred in CHERI's bedroom, and CHERI would egg Nicole and Danny on the whole time. She enjoyed it probably in the same way Danny and Nicole enjoyed it. After nightfall on March 26 of 2011, Zachary, Danny, and Nicole demanded that Vera put her shoes on. They were going for a walk, they told her. Witnesses who were present that night say that they believe Vera knew she was going to be murdered. At first, Vera refused to put on her shoes, but CHERI encouraged her to go. She knew she was going to get murdered that night, CHERI did. And the last thing they said was, "Good night, sugar babe." Then they walked to the railroad tracks near the family home, and when they arrived at the predetermined spot, they began to stab Vera with the kitchen knife. Their weapon of choice had been so dull that it would barely even penetrate Vera's skin. So they forced this poor woman to strip naked, so that they wouldn't have to work so hard at killing her. Vera was stabbed repeatedly. At one point, Danny got behind Vera, held on to her, and slit her throat. When they thought she was close enough to death, they laid her sideways on the railroad tracks and left her alone in frigid temperatures to die, making sure to leave her head laying on the tracks. After the group left the scene of the crime, they threw their murder weapon into a local body of water. The killers knew that a train would be coming around 2 a.m. that morning. They assumed that if Vera was hit by the train, she'd look like hamburger meat, in their words. This would render Vera unidentifiable, and they believed that much of the evidence would be lost. Poor Vera, after she had been left alone that night, she was not dead. She used the very last of her strength to remove herself from the rails. She curled up in a fetal position in the middle of the tracks. This would allow the train to go over the top of her without hitting her, and that last bit of strength she had would lead to the quick arrest of her murderers. The train conductor had spotted the body immediately, and he called the police.
Family Police Department, Pix.
Hello, this is Christopher, CSX Railroad.
Yes.
Hey, we got a report that we have a train stopped over near Central Parkway between East Main Cross Street and Clinton Court, right in between there across the Blanchard River.
Okay.
We got a report that we have a train stop right now because they see a naked female body laying in the middle of the track. Appears to be deceased.
Although it already ran over the body, Vera's body was exactly 12 inches off the ground, and the train's clearance had been just 13 inches. Barely missed her. Autopsy proved that Vera had been stabbed 21 times. Her throat had been slashed from ear to ear, and that nearly every bone in this poor woman's face had been broken from that beating. Police promptly went to the Brooks home in order to question the family. While the police removed everyone from the home so they could interview the family members supposedly one by one, CHERI was permitted to stay put throughout it all. I am not sure at all why this was allowed. Police found evidence inside the home, such as Nicole's bloody sweatshirt, the paddle, the belt, and the lock weapon, which Vera had been beaten with. Police arrested Danny and Nicole, who did confess. They stated that they had been given drugs by CHERI and talked into killing Vera. CHERI had even instructed them on how to do it. Both Danny and Nicole took plea deals. Danny was sentenced to 40 years to life for Vera's death, and Nicole received 23 years for a conspiracy charge. Literally, Nicole only got a conspiracy charge. Zachary was sentenced to 4 years. Yes, just 4, in prison for obstruction of justice. Can you believe that? As far as CHERI, the ringleader, was only charged with obstruction and drug trafficking. In 2015, she was sentenced to 40 months. And rumor has it, another one of her sons had a daughter that is allowed to live with this sadistic woman. The only good news that I can share with you is Vera's daughter is now being adopted by a family that loves her. In the clothes that Vera was wearing the day of her murder was a note wrote to her daughter that the adoptive family will let their daughter have when she gets old enough to understand. It said, "I love you, Willadine. You are a good little baby girl to us. I'm glad to be your mommy, and I'm glad that I had you on November 4th at 4:16 a.m., 6 pounds, 2 ounces, 19 inches long. Mommy loves you." As for Vera, she was recently laid in No Crest Cemetery. She recently received a beautiful new headstone which reads, Vera Jo Messersmith. This is a big deal as Vera always hated the last name of Regal. Since her father had SA'd her, she didn't want that name. Well, guys, next time I record, I will be back in my she shed with little Simon, my GS. He is missing me, I'm sure, and I am missing him. My son is babysitting all 3 of my dogs, and so I'll be glad to see them again. And I hope you guys have a blessed and happy week, and I'm going to leave you with a little clip of CHERI. I'm sorry, but this is one rough-looking woman that has been allowed to get away with way too much. Yeah, that's not a good note to leave on, is it? All right. Well, I do love you guys, and I thank you for supporting me. Y'all have a blessed week. Bye.
I just want to say that I've been very depressed the last 7 months since Vera Jo's been gone. I'm very sorry for what my cousin did. It's been stressful to me. I miss her.